Well, hello. Welcome to Fino Friday. Welcome to Sherry O'Clock. It's our last Sherry O'Clock of the week, of this International Sherry Week. Certainly not the last, because this formula, we will continue doing it in future edition of International Sherry Week, because it proves to be very well received by many people. First of all, let me tell you, well, my name is César Saldaña. I'm the president of the Consejo Regulador. For those of you who do not know me, let me tell you that we are streaming live in Facebook, in YouTube, in Twitter. So yeah, I hope with all these platforms, there's lots of people who are following our conversations around Fino Sherry with our very interesting three guests of today. With no further ado, let me tell you first about the first of our guests. Although he needs no introduction at all, he's Peter Sisseck. He's a very famous winemaker. He's based in Ribera del Duero. He's the author of the very famous Dominio de Pingus and Hacienda Monasterio. And well, he's now also in Jerez, as many of you know. He's now making finos in Jerez. He's original from Denmark. I didn't say that. But as I said, it's been working in Ribera for a long time now. For many years, he's been admiring our finos. He has always said that the best white wine in our country is Fino Sherry, and so there is a reason for him to come and to partner with the Del Rio family, Del Rio Gonzalez family, for this project that he will tell us a little bit about in a minute. So maybe we can welcome Peter now. Yes, there he is. Okay, hello Peter, how are you doing?
Very well. Great being here, and thank you very much for having me. It's a great honor.
My pleasure, and thank you for being part of Sherry Week. You were part of our World Dinner Party the other day on Wednesday with our common friend Scott Wolseley. So, and you told us on that occasion a little bit about your experience in Jerez, which is, I mean, with the very recent release of Viña Corrales. Can you briefly tell us a little bit about that again, if you don't mind?
Yeah. As you mentioned in the introduction, I've been making wine in Spain for this. It's actually my 30th year, so I've been here for 30 years now. And I came into, of course, I knew sherry before I came to Spain. I was brought up wine-wise, if you can say that, in Bordeaux. And of course, sherry has always been part of. And I remember in Bordeaux, my uncle. In Bordeaux, they have wonderful oysters, and we always had on Sunday in the oyster season. We had oysters with Fino. So I was introduced to Fino at that time. In Denmark, the sherry that people were drinking mostly would be Amontillado, very old Amontillado. I remember in my cellar, in my family cellar, they had some very old Amontillado. Mm-hmm. But then, of course, also cream, which is basically, what we call the grandmother's sherry. And most people, when they think about sherry, they think about sort of a sweet style, and it's not necessarily so. It might be the most sold wine. I'm not sure about that. You would know that better than I. But at least it's what you see the most, and sort of it has, if you can say that, a sort of an antiquated thing. Which is sad, because I truly do believe that the sherry region as a region, this is what I got to know when I was living in Spain, it is one of the oldest regions in Spain for making really high-class, export-orientated wines, and of course has had a very international following for many, many years, because a lot of the shippers were of foreign origin also. So in that sense, it was really interesting. And also, one of the things I was really taken with, because I've been trying to work on that in Ribera del Duero, is the vintage classification in Pagos that you have in Jerez, which is something I've been fighting for having similar, I mean, not exactly the same thing, but a sort of a vineyard classification in Ribera del Duero. And let's just say that's been very difficult. So, of course, when the opportunity through the Del Rio family that, of course, I've been working closely with since 1997, I was often in Jerez, and I love to go to the feria and all that. So, and we always talked about maybe I should try to do something. And I remember one of the first visits I had in the region was actually 1994, where I visited many of the wineries. And I remember then I spoke to one of the famous enologists there, winemakers, why they did not make vineyard designated Finos. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, Peter, sort of almost laughing at me, saying that, the process, the fact that we age our wines under the floor makes it impossible to distinguish from where the wine or the mosto comes from. And I remember, for me, it didn't sound right. I mean, and knowing a lot about also the history of Champagne, where sort of the similar, I always call Champagne, it's our cousin.
Yeah, that's
right. We
right.
have the same type of soils, and we also share a technology. It's not the same, but the product is through a technology, a special second fermentation for the Champagne. And for us, we have this talking about the Finos, this aging under the floor. No? But in the old days, and let's just say in the 70s, 80s, where the big brands in Champagne grew a lot and became bigger and bigger, of course, there was not a lot of interest in trying to put emphasis on the origin. So there was only very, very few specific wines that maybe had an origin. And it was until Jacques Celos was one of the great vinification guys in Champagne, who started doing with vineyards and stuff, that it suddenly that origin became important also in Champagne. And what's really interesting with the origin is that it takes it away from just a product. It really makes it like any other wine. I mean, we all know about the famous wine from Burgundy, who has probably more than in any other region in the world, a lot of local character, and the difference between all the vineyards and all that is very, very important in Burgundy. But also in many other places in France, of course, Bordeaux as well, but also minor areas, and of course in Germany as well. In Italy, in the north, in the Barolo area, also the origin, the vineyards are extremely important. So, and of course they're considered wines. The problem, as I see it, a bit with the Fino is it has become much more product, and where the origin is not so important. And so I was let's just say I was provoked by this comment from this enologist. And so it stayed with me, and so I said, if I ever do a wine in Jerez, I was tempted many times. And I remember, I actually many years ago, I saw a wonderful vineyard in not so far from where we actually bought our vineyard now, in the near to Pago Balbaina. It's called Campix, vineyard Campix, a wonderful vineyard overlooking the sea. Which is what is so great about the Balbaina vineyard, that it has one of the highest vineyards in the Marco, but overlooking the sea at the same time, which is quite
close to the ocean. Yeah.
So the idea was that we wanted to make a vineyard specific Fino. So in order to do that, I mean, the easiest, the best way of doing this is, of course, that you start harvesting and making your wine for 20 years, and you store it in your system, in the solera and with your criaderas and all that. And after 20 years, you might have a wonderful wine that you can start selling. As I don't have the patience and I don't have the money for doing that, I needed to find a bodega and that had a very good solera. So as I was only interested, basically, I'm really only interested in the Fino as a wine. It couldn't be any bodega because all the amotillados and olorosos, all that, we have wonderful wines, and maybe at another time like to want to do something with that. But right now we want to specify on the Fino. So we were able to find an old almanzanista in the town of Jerez, in the calle San Francisco Javier. There's a lot of other small wineries around there, wonderful, very good ones. And but this particular one, Ángel Zamorano, who used to be he was the founder of this, and he used to be the president of the Almanzanistas, which is a category that is dying out in Jerez. I mean, I think most people would know that the shippers or the big bodegas, they were more shippers than they were wine holders, and the stockholders were actually the small almanzanistas, who would have specific styles that then the big shippers, they will go and they will taste and say, this I would like for my blend of, say, whatever great name you can put on it. So this is what they did. Unfortunately, Ángel Zamorano in 2006, not unfortunately, but in 2006 he decided to sell because the almanzanistas sort of went out of need, you can say that, because the bigger bodegas, they were now also stock carriers and producers and all that. So he decided to sell, and it was sold to a guy from Sanlúcar, Juan Pinheiro, who has a small bodega also there in Manzanilla, in Sanlúcar. And he had been working a couple of years with Ramiro Ibáñez, who's a wonderful, one of the young, really interesting guys who's making really interesting study into the history and the origin of the wines of Jerez. And
pretty much interested on soil. I mean,
yeah, exactly. So through him and his good friend Willy Pérez, they have taught me a lot, because I came to Jerez without knowing anything about it, and it was 2017. So we have 2 years. We have not produced any wine. We have just been learning about the solera and the soils and all these things. So we really wanted to take it very slowly and not just burst onto the market without really understanding what we're doing. Well, in order for this wonderful solera that we were able to buy, we were also able to buy a wonderful vineyard in the Pago Balbainas. As I said before, Viña Corrales is called. It's a very old vineyard, and we found out by studying the wonderful archive that they have at González Vías that the great-grandfather of my partner, Carlos del Rio, he actually owned that vineyard. He bought it in 1896. So it has been in the family before. So we bought this. And it's next to also a very famous vineyard called Los Cuadrados, that is owned by the Hidalgo family, who makes La Gitana, a wonderful manzanilla that most people would know. Yeah. So we know we had pretty good idea that the origin would be very, very good. So we have now, for the last 3 years, this is the third year, we have been making the wine and the mosto, and of course turn it into sobre tablas. And aging. So as Ramiro had been selecting barrels in the cellar, he had identified around 74 barrels out of the 125 barrels we have in the Solera system. We have 440 barrels, I think, in all. We have a bit more now because we bought some more barrels. But and the cellar was organized in the traditional Jerezana way, which was Solera, Primera criadera, Segunda criadera, so only 3 levels. In the time of Ángel Zamorano, they had Oloroso on top, on the 4th level. They had Oloroso, but Juan Pinheiro, he took all that away before he sold the cellar. So we looked into, so we had part of the cellar is being used, the 74 barrels of the Solera system is being used for this Viña Corrales. So we chop up with this when we move the Solera. And the rest of the Solera, we decided to, first of all, to enlarge. So we are now, instead of just having 3 levels, we have now 5 levels. So we have the 5th and the 4th is for the sobre tabla. So we age the sobre tabla for 2 years before it comes in through the 3rd criadera. It comes into the system. No? So It's pretty, but so we have much more wine now than we used to have. So we have been adding a lot of volume to our stock, we can say, these last 2 years. And at the same time, because we had still more wine, we we had some wonderful Cabezuelas, very old, so all the lees from since the cellar was founded in the 70s, has all the lees accumulated, and this is what gives this wonderful vinosity to the wine. So I was very clear about that. We didn't want to get rid of those. So we sort of emptied the cellar, and we were able to buy a wonderful young wine from Machanudo, because we also bought a vineyard in Machanudo, 2 hectares in Machanudo. So we are creating basically a new Solera from Machanudo. So we will, in the future, we will have 2 Finos. We will have one from Saldaña, which is called Viña Corrales. Mm-hmm. And we have another one that will come out in maybe 4 or 5 or 6 years. I don't know exactly when. Mm-hmm. We'll feel it right. It will be Viña La Cruz from Machanudo. So it will be 2 very different wines, and they're already, I can even say now that the enologists told me about the origin was just bullshit, because the would eliminate all kinds of traces of origin. This is absolutely not true. I'd like to invite you, César, next time I'm in Jerez, so you can come and taste for yourself how different the wines really are. It's amazing. The 2 wines are Soberon also, but even through the aging thing, and how every single vineyard has a tendency of selecting its own kind of yeast for the aging. Most people might know that we have more, but typically around 4 different yeasts that are responsible for the floor on the top. Basically, you have the would be the Monteliense, which is normally the most predominant one. And then the Beticus, which is the other one. We also have two other ones that are in smaller proportion. But the way that this combination of yeast is very specific to the vineyard. And so it does, even the Solera and the aging under the floor will give a special character according to where the must is coming from.
Mm-hmm. So, I'm sure, Peter, that all through these years you have noticed the change in the perception that winemakers now have in Jerez about soil. I mean, soil has recuperated a very prominent role, and thank goodness now we see important brands with certain volume, which by definition needs certain flexibility in terms of supply, but they're proudly labeling their Finos with the pagos from which the grapes are coming. So I think there's been
I saw that this year that there's a famous wine in I'm not going to mention the name, but they have a special thing that they do in Rama every year. They take it, bring it out in spring, and for the first time, Mattias was actually stated on the back label. So it's good to see that even some of the bigger ones are taking the origin. That's an important thing. So.
Your wine is Viña Corrales is also in Rama. I mean, you feel
absolutely. And I remember you asked me. We have been meeting before this thing, and you asked me what in Rama means to me. And I can tell you that in our case, it is we take the wine out, and we actually right now in this moment, the son of Carlos del Rio Calete is right now with the team in the cellar bottling our second Saka, and I will explain why, because normally we'll only do 1 Saka, but this year, because of the Corona, we're doing 2. And they're actually right now bottling the second Saka right now. And so what we do is we take a measured amount of wine out. This is we're doing around in this Saka we're doing around 70 liters we take out of the barrel, and we then very carefully and under nitrogen and all that, and then we put it into a tank, with a floating top, and we leave it for 2 days. So we have left. So we did that already a couple of days ago, and we leave it there for 2 days. So the small rests of that could be of flour, whatever that could come into the wine. We let them settle. As they're quite heavy, they settle quite fast out. And so we bottle directly from the tank, but from the higher level, we have two valves where we can take. So we only take the clear wine out. And we did the first bottling, which is I have the bottle here.
Yes.
So we did a small bottling because we did the bottling in April last year, and of course that was right in the middle of the first confinement. And at that time, we had no idea what was going to happen, if this was going to continue for many months or whatever. So what was supposed to have been the first important Saka we did, we decided just to do a very small one, so we only did around 1,500 bottles. And thank God we were able to sell that very well, and everybody asked for more. And actually, because we only took a very small part of the first Saka out, the whole system needs to be moved, otherwise it sort of dies out. So we need to refresh the whole thing. So we decided that we wanted to do a second Saka, but a small one, because we don't want to disturb the spring one that we're going to do in April, May next year. So the first official big one we will do will be 2021. But we'll do a small one also now, but it will be smaller than maybe 4,000 bottles. So and it's all pre-sold, so it's wonderful.
Well, it's great. Anyway, the good news is there is a second Saka of Viña Corrales already, so I'm sure a lot of people will be happy to hear that.
But in the future, there will actually only be one. There will be a spring bottling of the Balbainas, because I think it goes very well with the style of Balbainas, which is sort of very light and beautiful, and it goes very well with the high activity of the floor in spring. And then most likely the Machanudo, which is sort of more complex and a bit more energetic wine, a bit more extract. We'll probably do an autumn bottling of that, because it sort of lends more to in the old days, I know we cannot call it this today, but in the old days you had a wine style called Fino, no? Okay. And especially the Machanudo vineyard, when it was owned by the Domecq, it was very famous for the Amontillados as well. Also for Fino, but especially for this Fino Amontillado style from Rivas and from Blasquez and others. No? So we'll see, but it's just an idea, but we don't know.
This is great to hear, Peter. And I'm afraid we're running a little bit out of time, because we have some of the guests waiting. But before we leave you, let me ask you, because this is always a question that we have always make ourselves. How would you encourage younger people to get into this type of wine, into this very special type of wine, which is Fino Sherry?
I mean, it's complex, because you need a lot of stock. So it's sort of a bit more of a PhD in wine, when you get into sherry. But what I would recommend is what a lot of the younger guys are doing, is unfortunate, you can say, but it's also good for the young ones. You can still find wonderful vineyards in Jerez, and you can eat some of them are for sale. So try to find a really, really good vineyard. Maybe in the beginning, just rent it or buy the grape from the vineyard. Probably with a option de compra, no? With a buying option. So if you earn a bit of money, you can maybe buy the vineyard later on. Rent a small area, buy a few tanks, and then make a white wine. Just to begin with, make a white wine. Put a few barrels aside and try aging it, and start to see how the flow is working and all that. And maybe with time they're still around in the area where you can buy wine in bulk. No? So you can buy a few things, but I would start making white wine. That's the easiest way of doing it, because otherwise, in order to really get into the Fino, it takes some time, and you need a lot of stock. And if you're young and eager and you want to have wine on the market, perhaps not the easiest wine to make. Huh?
Absolutely. Well, Peter, I've seen you have the bottle, but I'm not sure it was open. Do you have a glass of Fino Corrales?
Yeah. Wonderful.
Well, so cheers. Thank you very much.
This is because this is the bottle, and I haven't opened this one. This is the first. But this is actually a sample of the second one that arrived this morning. We have a wonderful lab in the winery at Dominio de Pingus. So we analyze all the wines from Jerez also here. So it came this morning to see if everything is okay, so we can talk. So
lucky you.
No. I think it's even better than the first. Huh? So
wow,
it will be exciting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye. Well, let me have a sip of Fino. Unfortunately, not Fino Corrales, but a beautiful Fino from El Puerto. And let's now introduce the next guest in our Fino Friday. Our next guest joins us from Belgium. Mattias Soberon is the author and founder of Served by Soberon, a cocktail and spirit blog with more than 60,000 followers. So only in Instagram. So it's really a very, very important blog. Mattias is a school teacher by day and a very serious cocktail creator by night, and has been an active Sherry Week supporter for several years, for which I'm extremely grateful. Can we have Mattias with us? Hello, Mattias. How are you? I don't think I cannot hear you.
Am I good now?
Now I hear you very well. So how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm fine. Do you also have a glass of Fino with you?
I have a glass of Fino with me. Thank you.
That's very, very important. So you're contacting us from where are you now?
I'm in Ghent, Belgium.
In Ghent. Okay, great. Good. So, Mattias, how did you get to the world of Jerez, of our wines? I know there's a place for sherry in your blog, in your communication, in your cocktails, but how did you get there?
It's really funny. Back when I was younger, my mother actually always had some Fino in our fridge. I've always known her for having it. And I didn't like it when I was younger. I was always like, oh, it tastes so chalky, it tastes so savory, it's a bit weird. And it actually took until I was really into cocktails. And I remember that I was in a tiki bar and I had a fog cutter cocktail, which actually has like a float of amontillado or cream, depending on which recipe you follow, on the top. And I was like, what is this? What kind of ingredient is added here? And they told me about sherry, and I was like, all right, okay, that's the kind of stuff my mom drinks. But I was still very unaware of all the differences. I started my blog then in 2017, January or February, and quickly thereafter I got talking to Andres Klaas. He's a Belgian restaurant owner from Tapas Bar in Antwerp, who also won the Gonzalez Bias cocktail competition, I think 2 years ago.
All right.
And we got talking about sherries, and he was telling me like if he had one dream, it was becoming bigger in the world of sherry. And I asked him all about it, and he was explaining everything to me, and I was so crazy enamored by the differences and by the concept of how the different cherries age and the difference in like the biological versus oxidative aging and how they are blended with sweeter cherries and how the grapes were put to rest for the sweet cherry and it told me so much because when you're talking about cocktail ingredients, you always want something pure, something that hasn't been messed with too much. You want nature to speak. Like for example, with tequilas or mezcals, you want the agave. With rums, you want the sugar cane to be pure. And with the beautiful thing about sherry wines is that it has exactly the same. It tells you so much about the place where it's from. Just like we were listening to in your first conversation, like there's so much to tell about just a tiny little place in Spain, but that has so much to offer. And when you start looking it up and you notice that sherry has been a cocktail ingredient for hundreds of years, then you just notice that it is a part that you cannot forget. And that's kind of how it all started for me.
That's very interesting. And indeed, the world of sherry is very diverse. But what do you think Fino has? I mean, why is it so special? I mean, what do you like of Fino in comparison to other styles of sherry?
Apart from the fact that maybe I'm like, I think working with an Amontillado for me is the most easy part. But I think Fino is the most interesting sherry to work with, because it brings out qualities in other ingredients that you cannot pull out with other ingredients, other wines, other sherries. The extremely dry and very, like, it's terroir driven and chalky flavor is unique. You can get nuttiness from other wines. You can get some like honey and fruity tones from other wines as well. But what Fino has to offer is something that, in my opinion, is the most special trait a fortified wine can have, actually. Whether you mix it with like unaged rums or with a gin or with agave spirits, like, it will always pull out the core of the other ingredients you're working with. And that's what I really love about it. And I think the beauty of it is that it starts most of the time like with one brand. You know, for me, Tio Pepe of González Bias, it was the first Fino I was acquainted with, because it's probably the most easy to get next to a couple of others. And you think like, okay, well, that's it. And then you start buying some other brands, and you compare them to each other, and you find the subtle differences between all of them, or sometimes big differences between them. And it's so interesting to see, like, if you take one gin and you put the 3 different Finos next to it, they all will pull out different aromatics and different flavors out of the base spirit. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things that the Fino can do.
It's very interesting because you mentioned Tio Pepe. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
All right. Okay. Yeah. It's interesting because I have 2 different Finos with me today. One of them is a Fino from El Puerto, from Lustau, which is beautiful. I love Finos from El Puerto. But the other Fino that I have, look at the color, is Tio Pepe. But it's a Tio Pepe that was bottled in 1986. That's sorry, it's a personal. It's very anecdotic and very personal, but I'm sharing it with you and with the rest of the people.
It's beautiful.
It was bottled for my wedding. Yeah, I was working at González Bias at that time, and so it's customary that often you do some bottlings, some special bottlings with the I don't have the bottle with me, but with the back label around the wedding, about the wedding, and I kept a case, and from time to time I open a bottle and I see the evolution of the Fino, and I tell you, it's superb. It's the color is very different, the smell is very different, but in the palate is purely Fino. It's so dry, so fresh, so sappy. It's it's
beautiful.
You can taste the
was it 96?
1986. 1986. That was 1986.
1986. I was not born then.
34 years ago. I'm an old man now, right? But it's very impressive. So, and this is another aspect of Fino, and I'm connecting with another tasting that we did on the occasion of International Sherry Week 3 days ago, about evolution in bottle, and that's something that is probably it's a little bit in fashion now here in Jerez. To see how these wines evolve in the bottle. But anyway, I'm moving away from our main topic. Let me tell you, and you have a very impressive blog with cocktails every day, with lots of not only sherry but many other drinks that form part of your cocktails. What is it your selection criteria when you are looking into drinks, beverages, wines, or spirits, to include them in your blog and in your cocktails?
That's a good question. I mean, like, I post daily cocktails, as you said, so I have to try a lot of stuff. But I think, like in the beginning, when you start working with spirits or wines, like you see thousands of products everywhere, and it's very hard to pinpoint a certain place. And for example, when just now, if I take, like, for example, rums, because I'm huge into rum cocktails as well, whether it's like rum agricole or rum from molasses, all of it. I, I think nowadays I try to find out like how it is produced and what I can find about the producers themselves, because there's a lot of bottling done in collaboration or in bulk trading or whatever, but like it's the what I've tried to learn is find my way, that the juice that is in the liquid that is inside the bottle, like what has it gone through, where has it been, who has touched it. Is it something that came from the field to the still or to the fermentation tanks and then to casks and then was bottled, or has it been to another place? Has it traveled? Like, how old is it? And the more I can learn about a spirit, I think the more interesting it gets for me. Like, as you said in my introduction, I'm a teacher, and I think one of the parts that I love is learning about the products I'm using. I'm not just taking a bottle and making some drinks with it. I really like to focus on the liquids that are in there. Yeah. And for example, with sherries as well, it started with just like tasting like 2 or 3 finos, and then I said no, I want to taste it all. So I got some amontillado, oloroso, palo cortado, and I just went on and on and on, and I dove deeper. And at that point, like, I noticed that it was almost impossible for me to grasp the world that sherry is. Even I thought it's such a small place, it cannot be that complex. Because, for example, rum comes from all over the world, and like I love rum and all its diversity, but like the sherry triangle is like so small.
Yeah.
And still there's hundreds of different interpretations of how the wine should taste and what it is like, and I think that is what really enamored me so much. Like I'm used to using a lot of vermouths as well. But I have the feeling that sometimes the base wine is a bit covered. You know, it's a lot about the botanical structure around it. And I know, for example, González Bias does it as well with the La Copa vermouths. They're great, and Lustau does it as well. But I think the beauty of the base product is in sherry. I think that's what I love most about it, is that you can really find your way with what has the person, what has the vineyard done, what has the people picking the grapes and pressing them and selecting the barrels, what has been happening before it reaches my mouth, you know. And I think the more you know what has happened, the more you can fall in love with the product. And last year I was in Jerez with Chelsea, visiting Bodegas Romate. And like just being there and like touching the barrels and seeing going to Venecia, like pouring it out straight out of the barrels. It's the fact that you can be there and feel and smell and taste it like how it is just makes you fall in love with the product even more.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we cannot bring everybody to Jerez. I mean, we would love that, and in fact, Jerez is becoming a very important wine tourism destination. The most visited wine region in our country is Jerez, by the way. But considering that we cannot bring all our potential consumers here, what would be, in your opinion, the way to encourage particularly younger people to drink sherry? I think I can anticipate the answer because cocktails is your world. But what other ways would you envisage to make younger audiences to get into the world of sherry?
I think one of the main problems that sherry and some other fortified wines have is that people will try one and they will either like it or dislike it and leave it at it, and they will say, "Oh, I didn't really like sherry." But if you compare it to like a white wine or like a beer or like a rum, people will not say, "I tried one and I didn't like the entire kind of product, so I will leave it at it." You need to tell people like, "All right, which Fino did you taste? All right, Lustau. Okay, I will give you some other. I will let you try, for example, Romate. I will give you Gonzalez Bias, whatever, and try some of them and compare them, and like maybe you will find something you like. Oh, you don't like Fino? Wait, there is more than Fino in the world of sherry. There's more dry sherries. Okay, let's go to Amontillado or Polo Cortado, Oloroso, whatever. Oh, you like it a bit more sweet? Wait, I still have something for you. It's still a sherry, you know, and you really have to make people try more. You cannot just try one beer and say, "I don't like beer." It doesn't work like that. You cannot give them like one red wine and say, "I don't like red wine." But the problem is that often, like if you're in Belgium and you go to a cafe or a restaurant and you take a look at the menu, it says dry sherry. But what is it? Is it a Fino? Is it an Amontillado? Has it been open for a week or maybe for like half a year because nobody drinks it? What has happened to the bottle? Is it like the knowledge needs to be spread at the core? You need to know, if you're into tasting products, you need to know that you have to taste several examples of something. And I think that's the most important part, is like, if you're young and enthusiastic about drinking wines, then taste different Finos, taste different sherries, try some different bodegas or different years even, maybe, like if you compare different enramas or whatever, or vintages with each other, and like go from there. Give yourself the time. I think that's the most important answer.
Great. That was a great answer, Mattias. Well, it was a pleasure. I'm afraid, you know, we're always time constrained, but it was great to talk to you and to share a glass of Fino with you. Thank you very much for our Fino Friday. Okay. Enjoy the day. Bye bye. Well, this Fino is very, very impressive. Both of them in different styles, but I'm thoroughly enjoying my sherry o'clock today. And we still have one more guest. Our next guest is Beanie Espey. Beanie's been in the sherry business for a while now. She's a company director and co-founder of Seco Wines. Beanie is an experienced global marketeer, and very early in her career, she did an internship in the marketing department of Gonzalez Bias. So probably we'll talk about Gonzalez Bias a little bit in our next interview. She was involved particularly in the change of the Tio Pepe bottle, which originally was brown, very dark color, to green. And can we have Beanie already?
Hello.
How are you? Good to see you.
Very well. How are you?
I'm fine. It's been a long time.
It has, too long.
Yeah, I remember when you showed up with your colleagues in the Consejo trying to build up the whole Seco initiatives. It was
a big bright idea.
Yeah, that's right. How are you doing? Oh, everything's going well?
That was 4 years ago, believe it or not. I remember because it was the US elections. We were in for last election.
That's right.
I remember it vividly.
And well, you have a glass of Fino, of course. Right?
I confess there's not a lot left.
Oh my God.
I've been watching for 45 minutes, having a lovely time.
I'm sure you have a bottle around. I'm pretty sure.
I certainly do. In the fridge, though.
By the way, what are you drinking?
I'm drinking our Seco Fino.
Your Seco, of course. Yeah.
Of course. Although I have to say that, of course, you mentioned it. Tio Pepe was my first love, so I will always have a fondness for Tio Pepe. So yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So you were there in Gonzalez Bias for how long?
Well, it's an interesting story, actually, because I enjoyed that Mattias was talking about how his mother had in many ways introduced him to sherry. In fact, the story's quite similar with me. My mother used to work for Croft, port and sherry. Yeah. And so I'd always heard about this magical world of Jerez, and my mother speaks Spanish. And then I was in Spanish university, and I needed to spend some time in Spain. And so, via a contact of a contact, I was offered the opportunity to do a marketing internship with at the team at González Vías with Salve Mateos and Paul Kersons. And I spent, it was a very short time, really, only 6 months. But what a 6 months. I packed in, well, obviously learning all about sherry, learning to dance sevillanas. I mean, you know, I did it all, and I had a fantastic time that has stayed with me forever and ever. And hence, here I am 18 years later with my own sherry brand. So to say it made an impression would be an understatement.
Absolutely. You come back to Jerez from time to time?
I do, yes. So we work with the winery Diez Merito, and therefore we come down, well, we try and come once a quarter, but obviously in the last year it's been a challenging time. And also, since I last saw you, I've had 2 small children. Well, they're obviously small. One is 2 years old and one is 8 months old. So I've been pretty busy between my sherry baby and my babies, but I do try and get down to at least once every 6 months. And obviously my business partners fill in as well. So yes, we're there as much as we can.
Secco is a range of sherries, right? Tell us a little bit about the idea and how it came about, and tell us a little bit about your project with sherry.
So yes, Secco just at the moment consists of 2 wines. We still have an idea to have more in the range, but I think the whole premise behind Secco, and I think again Mattias touched on this a little bit, and also of course so did Peter, is that sherry as a catch-all is very broad, and there's a lot to learn. There are lots of different styles, and so with the whole reasoning behind Secco was that we wanted to simplify it. In fact, we really wanted to just talk about a couple of styles that we felt were really exciting and relevant to kind of millennial consumers, and really touching on a lot of what Mattias was saying. You know, we feel that Fino in particular, but also Amontillado, both have a lot to offer to contemporary consumers who are looking for lighter, drier styles that, you know, are very versatile, that can be drunk in a myriad of ways. And so, yes, of course, we as sherry purists love to drink our sherry very chilled and neat, but we also spend a lot of time celebrating the versatility of sherry in cocktails, in spritzes. And I think one of the things that's interesting, you know, none of us are strangers to the challenges of selling sherry as a category. It does have complexity, but it's interesting how everyone, as soon as you talk about Fino in particular as having this breadth of application, you know, of being able to make a beautiful Fino tonic or a rebujito, as well as a fantastic classic tuxedo martini, as well as a wonderful chilled aperitivo, it just opens people's minds. And I think we found that a lot of bars and restaurants who maybe are not used to serving sherry, as soon as you sort of present it to them as a sort of fantastic option that they can do lots of interesting things with, you know, their eyes are really open, and there's a lot of enthusiasm about utilizing it. So we kind of, you know, have explored different ways of talking about sherry, and so for Secco for now it's Fino and Amontillado as a priority, but we may yet have more wines. We'll see.
And you have also, you mentioned different combinations, rebujito, Fino tonic, cocktails, and then there's sherry and food. An enormous versatility of sherry in gastronomy.
Absolutely. And in fact, again, one of the things that we've been trying to talk about a lot in our social media and in our accounts is that it's not just about Spanish food. You know, in the same way, to use a crass analogy, you're not only going to drink champagne when you're in France, you know, or in a French restaurant. You know, there is so much application for sherry. And I think that wonderful versatility, the very nature of how it combines with this sort of tapas style culture of sharing plates and different flavors. You know, we absolutely try and apply that, whether it's to, you know, Japanese food, which we're all familiar with, but also, you know, looking at Lebanese, which has got a wonderful kind of complex array of flavors. So, you know, we talk about the small plates rather than tapas, that sense of conviviality, of sharing, and of everybody finding a way to drink the Fino that works for them. And
one of those options would be fish and chips.
Of course, and it's Friday. I mean, it's Friday night, fish and chips and a bottle of Fino. There's literally nothing better.
Right.
Again, it's funny how, we often do lots of consumer events and we talk to people about when they think they would enjoy sherry. And as soon as you say to them, do you like calamari? Yes. Do you like tempura prawns? Yes. Right. Okay. Well, then next time you're having your fish and chips, this is what you need to be drinking. Yeah, and it just, it's these simple, analogies that really work very well with getting people to say, because I think something that Mattias touched on, we are finding when we talk to people that no one's saying, I don't like sherry or I don't want to drink it. It's just, I'm not sure how that's relevant to my life. It's not a category that I've explored yet. I have lots of other options. Why should I drink this? But it's very, very easy to get over that hurdle because there are so many beautiful ways to enjoy it and to drink it and to share it.
Absolutely. And this is not something exclusive of United Kingdom, for instance. I mean, British consumers. I mean, it's. Do you think there's that same possibility, that same opportunity is all around the world?
Absolutely. So, I mean, we're very lucky. We are 3 business partners at Secom. Alexa and I are both based in the UK, but Polly is actually based in Hong Kong. And the 3 of us met in Hong Kong. So that's where the story began. We met on the junk drinking wine, saying, why are we not drinking sherry? And that was a kind of instant love affair with one another and with the wine, and hence why we're here today. And so Polly's based in Hong Kong, and she is absolutely growing awareness of our brand, but also of the broader category in her own way. We are currently distributed in Hong Kong, in China, and in Japan. And Japan, as you well know, is a really exciting market. It's a very receptive market. And we've had a lot of fun. She in particular has had a lot of fun, working with accounts there and with restaurants there. So absolutely. I mean, and again, I've had calls to travel to the US quite a lot for business, and the reception there is amazing. There's just so much excitement and enthusiasm for sherry and its application. And in fact, we've got a sort of team of ambassadors over there. I just can't wait to get our product physically arrived safely in the US. But I think there's huge potential. And I mean, in fact, on Tuesday we had a call with our Brazilian distributor. She's super energized about it as well. Really sees that Brazil in many ways is a blank canvas. There isn't a lot of history of importing sherry. Of course, there's more of a history of importing port. And so for her, she's just, again, the doors are really open to these conversations. So yeah, we see a lot of potential globally for this. It's
very interesting that you mentioned Brazil, because I think it's in the top 3 or top 4 in the number of events organized for International Share Week. So there's a lot of, I think, curiosity. I mean, exploring people who really like to explore new things is definitely a potential consumer for sherry. I mean, this is where we have to work. Well, Beanie, it was great having you and then sharing a glass of Fino. We'll have to serve another pour. But anyway, it was great to have you. I hope to see you in Jerez soon. I hope that all this terrible situation we're living comes to an end, and you can restart again your quarter trips to Jerez. Next time you have to come to the conference. Hello.
Absolutely. Right. Thank you so much. Have a lovely weekend.
It was great. Thank you.
Adios.
Well, that was a very diverse group of guests, all of them enjoying Fino. I have been enjoying my Fino too. I hope that all of you who followed our Sherry O'Clock today on Fino Friday also had the time to enjoy not only the interesting information that was brought up by our very, very interesting guests today, but also a good glass or 2 of Fino. It's Friday, so you can indulge yourself with a nice glass before going to dinner or whatever you do now. Okay. Well, thank you very much to all of you. And International Share Week continues. We have some other events coming along tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. But anyway, thank you very much for being with us. Bye-bye.